It is a contradiction that the mind struggles to accept. When we imagine the cactus, our internal geography immediately transports us to the scorching deserts of the American Southwest or the arid scrublands of Mexico. We see tall saguaro silhouettes against a setting sun or heat waves shimmering off the sand. We associate the cactus with the relentless pursuit of water and an intolerance for the biting cold. But nature does not abide by the simple categories we assign to it. Here in the frozen soil of the northern United States, regions that see blizzards, ice storms, and temperatures dropping to 40 degrees below zero, lies a plant that defies this logic. It is not an invasive species, nor a recent greenhouse escapee. It is an ancient native resident of the temperate north. In the dead of winter, it looks lifeless, a wrinkled gray-green mat of vegetation that appears to have succumbed to the frost. But this appearance is a sophisticated deception. Beneath the snow, this plant is performing a biological miracle, manipulating its own cellular chemistry to survive conditions that would shatter the cell walls of an oak tree or turn a cultivated strawberry into mush. And when the spring thaw arrives, it will not only rise and inflate with life, but it will produce a flower of stunning yellow brilliance, followed by a deep red fruit with a flavor profile often compared to a ripe strawberry and a watermelon. This is not a myth of the desert. This is the Eastern Prickly Pear, Opuntia humifusa. It is the cactus that conquered the cold, a source of food and medicine that sustained indigenous peoples for millennia. Yet today, it sits largely forgotten in the sandy margins of our landscapes, viewed as a weed rather than the resilient perennial food source it truly is. The Eastern Prickly Pear, scientifically known as Opuntia humifusa, is a botanical anomaly in the modern consciousness. While its cousins in the Opuntia genus, specifically Opuntia ficus indica, are cultivated globally for their fruit, tuna, and pads, nopales, the eastern variety has slipped into obscurity. Its range is staggering. While we expect cacti in Arizona, we do not expect them in the sand dunes of Massachusetts, the rocky outcrops of southern Ontario, or the pine barrens of New Jersey. Yet this plant is native to all these regions, stretching west to the high plains of Montana and south to Florida. It is the only cactus widespread in the eastern United States. Unlike the towering, tree-like cacti of the Sonoran Desert, Opuntia humifusa keeps a low profile. It is a prostrate plant, creeping along the ground, rarely rising more than a foot or two in height. It forms dense mats or colonies that can span several meters. Its anatomy consists of flat, fleshy pads, which are actually modified stems called cladodes, armed not typically with the long, terrifying spines of the desert varieties, but often with clusters of tiny hair-like barbs known as glochids. These glochids are perhaps one reason for the plant's lack of modern commercial adoption. They are formidable defenders, easily detaching and irritating the skin. However, for those who know the secrets of this plant, the barrier is easily overcome. The rewards for navigating these defenses are twofold. First, the pads themselves are a vegetable. When the young pads emerge in the spring, tender and bright green, they can be harvested, cleaned of their spines, and cooked like green beans or okra. They possess a tart, citrus-like flavor and a unique texture. Second, and perhaps more famously, is the fruit. In late summer and early autumn, the fertilized flowers give way to oblong purple-red fruits. Unlike the bland, watery taste of many wild berries, the fruit of the Eastern Prickly Pear is intensely sweet, rich in mucilage, and vibrant in color.
It was once a treat eagerly anticipated by settlers and First Nations alike, a burst of sugar and hydration available just as the heat of summer began to wane. Today, we import dragon fruit from Vietnam and star fruit from the tropics, marveling at their exotic shapes in our grocery aisles. Yet right under our feet, in the sandy soils of the temperate world, grows a native succulent that requires no irrigation, no pesticides, and no winter protection, offering a harvest that is both delicious and historically profound. To understand the true value of the Eastern prickly pear, we must look back long before the arrival of European agriculture. The history of this plant is deeply intertwined with the history of the indigenous peoples of North America. Archaeological evidence suggests that Opuntia species have been utilized by humans for at least 9,000 to 12,000 years in the Americas. While the massive domestication efforts of cacti occurred in central Mexico, the northern tribes, including the Algonquin, the Cherokee, and the Wampanoag, recognized the Eastern prickly pear as a critical seasonal resource. Ethnobotanical records indicate that the plant was far more than just a casual snack. It was a pharmacy and a utility. The fresh pads, or cladodes, were peeled and applied as a poultice to wounds, insect bites, and snake bites. The mucilage, the sticky gel-like substance inside the pad, functions similarly to aloe vera. It soothes inflammation, creates a barrier against infection, and promotes healing. In a world without synthetic bandages or antiseptics, a patch of prickly pear was a vital first aid kit. Nutritionally, the fruit served a specific purpose. Ripening in late summer, the fruits provided a source of readily available carbohydrates. For tribes in the varied climates of the East, drying the fruit was a common practice. Once dried, the fruit could be stored for winter use, added to stews, or mixed into pemmican, a high-energy food made of fat and protein. The seeds, which are hard and numerous, were often parched and ground into a flour, adding a nutty flavor and thickening agency to soups. There is also evidence of the plant's use in dye making. The betalain pigments that give the fruit its deep magenta hue are potent. Indigenous artisans used the juice to dye baskets and textiles, creating vibrant reds and purples that echoed the colors of the sunset. But perhaps most interestingly, the presence of Eastern prickly pear in certain northern locations may be a result of intentional cultivation, or at least intentional distribution. We often find colonies of Opuntia humifusa located near ancient campsites and village settlements. It is highly probable that as people moved, they carried the pads with them. A cactus pad is remarkably resilient. You can detach it, carry it in a pouch for weeks, drop it on the ground in a new location, and it will root. It was a portable, perennial crop that required zero maintenance once established, a perfect food security backup for a semi-sedentary lifestyle. This was not merely a wild plant, it was a companion species, traveling with humanity, thriving in the disturbed soils of village margins, and offering its sweetness in return for its propagation. To truly grasp the biological potency of the prickly pear, we must look away from the snows of North America and turn our gaze to the sun-baked plains of Australia. Here, the story of Opuntia is not one of forgotten food, but of an apocalyptic invasion. It serves as a stark reminder: the very traits that make a plant a resilient survivor in its home can make it a conqueror abroad. The prickly pear arrived in Australia with the first fleet in 1788. Captain Arthur Phillip collected the pads in Brazil during the voyage. His intention was not to grow food, but to establish a cochineal industry, the cultivation of the tiny parasitic insects that live on the cactus and produce the vibrant red dye needed for the British soldiers' coats. For decades, the plant was a well-behaved curiosity in garden pots. But as settlers moved inland, they took the cactus with them for hedges and drought fodder. They did not realize they were releasing a biological entity perfectly engineered for the Australian climate, yet lacking the natural predators that kept it in check in the Americas. By the 1870s, the green hell had begun. The species involved, primarily Opuntia stricta and Opuntia inermis, cousins of our Eastern prickly pear, found the Queensland soil to be a paradise. Without the freezing winters of North America or the boring beetles of Mexico to slow them down, they exploded. By the early 20th century, the prickly pear was spreading at a rate of 1 million acres per year. It moved faster than the settlers could clear it. It crushed fences, invaded homes, and swallowed entire townships. By 1925, it had rendered 250,000 square kilometers of formerly productive land utterly useless. This is an area roughly the size of the United Kingdom. Desperation set in. The government offered bounties. Farmers used flamethrowers. They poured hundreds of tons of arsenic pentoxide, a deadly poison, onto the land. The cactus absorbed it all and kept growing. It seemed indestructible, a botanical monster that threatened to consume the entire continent. Salvation came not from machinery or poison, but from nature itself. In 1925, scientists introduced a natural enemy from South America, the Cactoblastis cactorum, a moth. The larvae of this moth are voracious feeders. They bore inside the cactus pads, eating the plant from the inside out, turning the fleshy green structures into papery dust. The result was one of the most spectacular successes in the history of biological control. Within 6 years, the billions of tons of prickly pear that covered Queensland had collapsed. The green monster was gone, leaving behind liberated soil and a grateful populace. This chapter of history teaches us a vital lesson about context. The prickly pear is neither good nor evil. It is simply a powerhouse of survival. In North America, it is a native resource held in balance by the ecosystem. In Australia, it was an unchecked force of nature. It reminds us that when we rediscover these lost crops, we must respect their power, understanding that their resilience is a tool that must be wielded with wisdom.
If the Eastern prickly pear is so resilient, delicious, and useful, why has it vanished from our culinary maps? Why do most people living in New York, Ohio, or Illinois have no idea that a cactus grows wild in their state? The loss of Opuntia humifusa is not a story of extinction, but of cultural amnesia and agricultural incompatibility. The first factor was the arrival of the European agricultural model. The settlers who colonized the eastern seaboard brought with them a specific suite of crops: wheat, barley, apples, and brassicas. They viewed the land through the lens of temperate European farming, which prioritized row crops and plowed fields. To the colonial farmer, the prickly pear was not a resource, it was a nuisance. It grew in the sandy, rocky pastures where they wanted to graze sheep or cattle. Its spines and glochids could injure livestock mouths. Consequently, it was dug up, burned, and eradicated from prime agricultural land. It was pushed to the margins, the sandy dunes, the rocky cliffs, the forgotten corners where the plow could not reach. Secondly, there's the issue of processing. We live in an age of convenience. We prefer fruits that can be eaten out of hand, skin and all: apples, grapes, blueberries. The Eastern prickly pear demands patience. The glochids, those tiny, hair-like spines, are insidious. If you touch the fruit with a bare hand, you will be picking microscopic barbs out of your skin for days. To eat it, one must carefully burn off the spines over a flame or peel the fruit with tools.
As society moved toward fast, convenient calories, the labor-intensive prickly pear fell out of favor. Furthermore, the fruit of Opuntia humifusa is smaller than the commercial Opuntia ficus indica imported from Mexico. In a market driven by size and visual uniformity, the smaller, wilder eastern fruit could not compete. It was relegated to the category of starvation food or a curiosity for children rather than a staple crop. Finally, we must consider the change in our aesthetic landscape. In the 20th century, the ideal American landscape became the manicured lawn, a carpet of non-native green grass maintained with irrigation and herbicides. The prickly pear, with its sprawling, messy habit and shriveled winter appearance, did not fit this aesthetic. It was viewed as untidy. Landscapers and homeowners removed it in favor of boxwoods and hydrangeas. We effectively designed our environment to exclude it. We engineered our food systems to ignore it. And in doing so, we forgot that we have a plant capable of surviving the harshest climate scenarios our region can throw at it.
While we have ignored the Eastern prickly pear, botanists and physiologists have remained fascinated by it. Modern science reveals that this humble cactus possesses biological mechanisms that are nothing short of engineering marvels. The most extraordinary property of Opuntia humifusa is its cold tolerance. How does water-filled succulent survive -40 degrees Fahrenheit? Water expands when it freezes. For most plants, if the water inside their cells freezes, the resulting ice crystals puncture the cell membranes, leading to death. The Eastern prickly pear employs a radical strategy called extracellular freezing and dehydration. As winter approaches and days shorten, the plant stops taking up water. It begins to actively pump water out of its cells and into the intercellular spaces. Simultaneously, it increases the concentration of solutes, sugars, salts, and mucilage inside the cells. This acts as a natural antifreeze. By lowering the freezing point of the remaining intracellular fluid, the plant prevents ice from forming inside the living cells. The water in the spaces between the cells may freeze solid, but the vital machinery of life remains unfrozen, merely dormant. Visually, this is why the plant looks dead in winter. It has voluntarily dehydrated itself. The pads wrinkle, lay flat against the ground to benefit from the insulating warmth of the earth and snow cover, and turn a purple-gray color due to the production of beta-cyanins, which protect the plant from high light intensity during the cold. It is a state of suspended animation. When spring rains return, the cells reabsorb the water, and the pads inflate within days, turning vibrant green again. Beyond its survival skills, the nutritional profile of the Opuntia genus is receiving renewed attention. The pads are rich in fiber, specifically pectin and mucilage, which have been shown in numerous studies to help regulate blood sugar levels. In Mexico, Opuntia is a standard dietary recommendation for managing type 2 diabetes. While most studies focus on the larger Ficus indica, the chemical composition of humifusa is remarkably similar. The fruit is packed with antioxidants. The red pigment, betalain, is the same compound found in beets. It is a potent anti-inflammatory agent. The fruit also contains high levels of magnesium, vitamin C, and taurine, an amino acid rare in the plant kingdom, usually found in meat and fish. Ecologically, Opuntia humifusa is a powerhouse. It utilizes crassulation acid metabolism photosynthesis. Unlike most plants that open their pores, stomata, during the day to breathe, losing moisture in the process, cam plants open their pores at night when it is cool and humid. They store carbon dioxide as an acid and use it for photosynthesis the next day while keeping their pores sealed tight. This makes them incredibly water efficient.
In an era of climate uncertainty, where erratic rainfall and heat waves are becoming the norm, a crop that sips water, withstands freezing, and requires no fertilizer is not just a curiosity, it is a blueprint for the future of sustainable agriculture.
Why does the Eastern Prickly Pear matter today? Why should we care about a shriveled cactus in the snow? We care because our current agricultural system is fragile. We rely heavily on annual crops that require massive inputs of water, energy, and labor. We rely on supply chains that stretch thousands of miles. We have forgotten the value of perennial food systems, plants that you plant once and harvest for decades. Opuntia humifusa represents a forgotten wisdom. It reminds us that abundance is not always found in the imported or the highly modified. Sometimes abundance is native. It is adapted to the land as it is, not as we wish it to be. For the home gardener, the permaculturist, or the sustainable farmer, this plant offers an opportunity. It transforms the useless parts of the land, the sandy strip by the road, the rocky slope where the mower breaks, the sun-baked corner where the hose doesn't reach, into a productive food forest. Reviving the Eastern Prickly Pear is about more than just a new flavor. It is about reconnecting with the deep history of the North American continent. It is about acknowledging the ingenuity of the indigenous peoples who identified and stewarded this resource. And it is about preparing for a future where resilience is the most valuable currency. The next time you walk through a sandy pine barren or a rocky field in the east, look down. You might see a flat, thorny paddle creeping across the ground. Do not dismiss it. You are looking at a survivor of the Ice Age, a provider of medicine, and a bearer of sweet fruit. You are looking at a plant that knows how to endure. And perhaps, if we are wise enough to welcome it back into our gardens and our diets, it can teach us how to endure as well.